Okay, I've got 2020 open here. It looks like SolidWorks. Believe me, all of the native feel is still going to be there. The graphics are a little sharper, and you'll see that as I go through here, it does look a little crisper than older versions of SolidWorks, especially when you're dealing with large assemblies. One thing that's new is they did decide to have this tab right here on by default when you open up SolidWorks 2021. It's not really a new thing. On my home page, there's this link that I can go to, and it's basically a place where you can get vetted SolidWorks files from the distributors, from the suppliers, from the manufacturers themselves, so you know that they're accurate models, not something from GrabCAD or TurboSquid where it's just anybody can put it up there. These are the actual models from the companies themselves. And so it's part of that SolidWorks community. What this tab does here is they've just brought that web page into a tab on your task pane here. So if I wanted to find parts for something in SolidWorks, and it was usually if it's hardware, I'm just going to go to McMaster. But if it's some specialty thing, you can see they have all different kinds of files, again, from robotics, pneumatics, all sorts of different companies post their files here because I figure if you're going to put their model in your assembly, you're probably going to order that assembly, or order that product. So they're happy to give them to you for free. You can search here, like if I just want to see a bearing or something. Here's different bearings, and you can see it shows you, what supplier this is coming from, gives you a little thumbnail of what it is. If the thumbnail's not good enough, you can hit this 3D and it'll actually give you sort of a viewer. There we go. That I can take a look at the model itself. So there's different standard views. I can take a look at this. And then if I want to download that part, I can pick which configuration I want and then just have a file that I can drag and drop into SolidWorks right from my task pane here. So it's just an easier way to search for parts, but it's always one of those things whenever you see something new, you don't know what it is, it can be a little confusing or feeling like they're trying to push something on you. It's a soft sales pitch because it's just making your job easier. You don't have to model all those files. You can just get them from the suppliers right here in SolidWorks. All right, this first part of the show that I'm going to do is really about large assembly design. It's always been a bugaboo with SolidWorks, slow open times, choppy graphics, crashing a lot, those sorts of things. And they've done things to alleviate in the past, but they've really done some really nice stuff since 19. If I hit my R key, which I'm sure a lot of you do to show recent documents, they expanded this in 19. You can show up to 100 recent documents. So you pretty much see what you've been working on for the last couple of weeks. I only did 50. I don't need to be greedy. But you can see I get these little thumbnails of the parts that I'm using. Here's the one I want. And you can just click here, take a look at how you're going to open it, any configurations or things like that. And I'm going to open it in this option called Large Design Review, which is not new. They came up with it probably 2014, somewhere around there. And how it works is rather than waiting for SolidWorks to load in all the references, what it's going to do is it's basically going to open an E-drawing, just the tessellated skin of your model. So it doesn't bring in all those parametrics, all your planes, all your extrusions, all that information is out of there. All you're looking at is the design itself. This top half that we're looking at here is the stuff that came out back in 2014. Since 19, the list down here has been getting longer of things that you can do to actually edit the component while you're in, edit the assembly while you're in this mode. So I've got to put in a sub-assembly. I've got to take a look at some mates and things like that. but I don't want to spend the 15 minutes loading a large assembly, doing the 5 minutes of work, and then 15 minutes to save the large assembly. I want to try and make this as fast as possible. I'm going to say okay, and it still takes a little time because this is a really large assembly, but that wasn't really very long at all. I've already got the thing open. I can take a look at how the subassembly structures are, hide and show components, measure, all sorts of things, basically like e-drawings. When I was at that file open, there was a little checkbox that said edit. Right now, all I can do is those types of things. I can do section views. So you can see this is a pretty impressive assembly, and this is one of the things that's sort of a testament to the modern SolidWorks assembly environment, is this was made by just a hobbyist during the pandemic, some guy named Dave Rutland, who created this assembly. I go to the information on it. It's no joke. It gives me my information here. There we go. So this guy in his spare time made a 3,000 part assembly and was able to do that just on a regular home. He didn't have a team, he didn't have supercomputers, he just built this at his house when he was bored, and for some reason posted it for free to GrabCAD. So there you go. If I were him, I would have done it to TurboSquid and made some money for all the work, but it certainly saved me from having to build my own 3,000 part assembly to show you, because I can't show you any of the stuff I worked here. I Google it. Anyhow, so this is an assembly. It's in this mode that's called Large Design Review, and I didn't choose edit when I opened it. I can still edit it at any time. All I need to do is right-click the top icon in the assembly, then I get a choice that says Edit Assembly. I do have to warn you that if you have any flexible sub-assemblies in your top-level assembly, you cannot edit that. It has to be solved as rigid, all of the sub-assemblies. And the reason that is because if you've got a flexible sub-assembly, it has to actually solve the location that it's in. All I'm looking at here graphically right now is how this thing was last saved. So it hasn't been rebuilt or anything like that. I'm just jumped in there. But when I chose to edit it, it did bring in some information that I didn't have previously. One big thing is I've got all my mates here. And since when I opened it, there were no errors in the thing, and this part actually was located in a different position. When I chose to edit it, it loaded up all the mates and it solved where these parts are supposed to be into position from each other. I can edit these mates in this mode. So I can delete a mate, add a mate, or even find where this assembly is in my model tree here. I can even delete components out of it, which is huge. I can go in here and edit this stuff, and I didn't have to wait. I'd still be waiting for this thing to load, and I've already done what I needed to do as far as, hey, I think there's a problem with one of these assemblies. It's not made it in right. In fact, it's not even supposed to be in there. Can you take a look at it? I was able to do all that in this large design review. But here's where the power really comes in. Like I said, the large design review, they've been making it more and more powerful over time. And in 19, they gave us the ability to insert components. Also, take a look at this. The tooltips used to just be text. Now, a lot of the tooltips, because SolidWorks is a graphic program and it's international, show you visually what the thing's going to do. So yes, I would like to insert a component. It sends me out to browse for one. And I'm going to grab another one of these GrabCAD files that I found. Somebody modeled an afterburner. So I'd love to have one of those in there. So I can actually add files to my assembly in this mode now. So it's not just an e-drawing that I'm looking at and able to take measurements and things like that. I can actually start doing my work without ever having to resolve this whole model. It has the choices like I can spin it around if I need to before I drop it in. And there we go. I can insert a new component and even start mating these in. Okay, we're all familiar with these items right here. The pop-ups that show us the mates, those have been around for a while. I use them all the time, they're great. But there's a new one, when you click on one, let me try that again. I'll show it to you in a second here. You can do patterns as well. If I needed a bunch of these afterburners for some reason, you're certainly welcome to make patterns in the assembly so we can put in new files, we can make patterns of them, and we can make them in place, all in this large design review. So for any reason I needed two of these stacked on each other, I can do that type of maneuver. Okay, just give it enough spacing so I can see this thing move.
Hey Lars, just for everyone's background, what hardware are you running on?
Okay, this is nothing special. I'm running on a ThinkPad, Lenovo ThinkPad. Let's see.
Thanks.
Yeah, I can get to it from here, right? So yeah, it's not a supercomputer or anything. It's just a laptop that I run around with. So yeah, that's a good question because a lot of the things that I'm doing here would definitely chew up this computer if I was trying to do this all full width. So there's my pattern. Shows up just in the feature manager tree, just like it would. So you can also edit, delete patterns that are existing, edit, delete mates that are existing. You can do a lot of data management that you need to do. And most importantly, you can save that information. And now the next person that opens it up, they're going to have those changes. Those mates are going to be gone, the part's going to be gone, the new part's in there mated. I just clicked and dragged and dropped a new part. So you can do operations like that as well. But I was hoping to show you that the quick one. When I hit concentric mate here, there we go. I don't know if it's because I'm presenting, but what should be seen when I wasn't presenting, when you hit a concentric, it'll pop up another fly up that allows you to lock rotation or flip the mate alignment. Hopefully in a smaller assembly, I'll be able to show that to you. Okay, so they've really spruced up the large design review. to make it something where it's not just, hey, I can open this thing up and take measurements and take a look at the structure of it. I can actually get in there and start making changes and not have to wait 15 minutes to load and 15 minutes to save. I can just be in and out. The whole thing takes 15 minutes. So that's great, but you run into the same problem with drawings, especially if you have a large assembly drawing. You try to open it up, even if you do it in lightweight, if anything's, you know, flexible or not solved or has external references, things like that, that's going to come up and take a long time to open up that drawing. So if I just need to open up a drawing, make some quick changes to a bill of materials, put in some notes, put dimensions, that sort of thing, I no longer have to load the drawing or weight or even lightweight. So here I've got a drawing of that very same assembly with the thousands of pieces, and I don't want to wait 15 minutes to open this thing up. All I need to do is put in some notes, dimensions, and be out of there. So when I click on here, lightweight note mode, resolved, those have been around for a while, and those are the ones that take forever. Quick view takes no time, but it's basically like opening a PDF. I can save it as a PDF, I can print it, but I can't make any changes to a quick view. It's just opening up a snapshot of what it looked like when it was last saved. This detailing mode is kind of the best of both worlds. And it also has the worst of both worlds as the quick view is, it's going to be a snapshot of what the drawing looked like when it was last saved. If the assembly has had changes made to it, you're going to get those blocks that show that this has to be rebuilt. But if nothing's happened to the assembly since I've done it, or I don't really care, because you'll see that when I open this up, the afterburner is not going to be there because I'm not resolving this thing. I'm just opening it up in this detailing mode. So it's not as lightning fast as the LDR, the large design review. It does take a minute just to get the tool going. And then it'll bring up one of those warnings that tells me what I can and can't do when I'm in this mode. Yeah. So in the detailing mode, I'm able to do this stuff. Create detail views, crop views, put in annotations, save it, draw sketches on it, or put in dimensions or format dimensions. Maybe somebody said, hey, all this stuff's in aerial. Can you change that? And I don't want to, again, wait that long to just do a simple operation like that. Okay, so it did give me that warning because things have changed since I was last in here. When items haven't had any changes, they're going to look fine. But this sheet one, you can see it had some problems because I actually did save that afterburner in there. And so if I want to see the afterburner in there, then I'm going to have to save it. But right now, not the top of what I needed to do. I just need to get in and out of here and do some quick changes that somebody asked for. So if I need to make changes to a bill of materials, things like that, I can, you know, put in rows and columns and things like that. I cannot put in a brand new bill of materials because that would take it to be resolved where it's going to need to see a list of all the files and that sort of thing. So the tables are, you can edit tables, but the amount of tables you can put in is limited. You'll see if I select, right click on here and go to tables, I can only put in revision or general tables, which if I wanted to put in a revision table, maybe that's one of the things I needed to do. There it is. So now it's in the assembly. I can move things around. And again, these are showing up with the little cross hatch because I actually did save that change to that assembly. On the annotations, I have a really long list of annotations. So you can see anything that's grayed out here just is stuff that I cannot do in this mode, but there are a ton of things I can do. I can add notes, I can put in balloons, I can edit notes, I can change the font on them, those sorts of things. Stuff that it does not take the model loaded to be able to do. Like if I needed to bring in a note block, and I can do that relatively painlessly. As I had said before, putting in notes and dimensions are certainly something that I can do. And I, again, am way ahead of the curve here because I didn't have to wait so long for this large drawing to open. The amount of views I'm able to do, very small here, but detail view. So the reason you can do that or crop view is because you're really just editing an existing view. But if you wanted to do something like a section, that would take the model being loaded. All right, so that's this new detailing mode. You guys have any questions on any of that? It's really useful. Like I said, I can save this, and the whole operation that I just did was a fraction of the amount of time that it would have taken to load this drawing up resolved. I believe fully resolved, it takes about 10 to 12 minutes the first time I opened it. So again, I've done all the work I needed to do in just a few minutes, not having to wait for that large design to port over either way. Another way that people use drawings like this as a communication tool. And I've been mentioning e-drawings a bit here and there because it's something where somebody doesn't need SolidWorks to open it and they can see your design. E-drawings gave us the ability to mark up pretty much right out of the gate, but SolidWorks has also started with this markup tool that we can do. It does prefer that you have a touch screen, but you can draw stuff with your mouse, or of course you can type in items as well. So when you do this markup, what it does is it'll actually save a file, a markup file that gets attached to the drawing. So you can mark it up, say, hey, I marked up this drawing, the person opens it in SolidWorks and can see the markups and delete them as they're making the changes and things like that. I know a lot of people like to print out the drawings and physically do a markup, maybe take a picture of that, or they've gotten quite good at marking up PDFs. But this is just another option, a communication tool, where you're not going to need to take the step out of the design. All right, let's take a look at this model right here. You see that it will just open resolved. So that opening this little thing took more time than me actually opening that drawing of the 2,000 parts. But in the past, we've had this publish e-drawings, and you can also do a save as to e-drawings. And what's the difference? The difference is if you publish e-drawings, it just opens the file in e-drawings, but it doesn't put any sort of the options, the export options that you have inside of SolidWorks for e-drawings. If I go to my export choices and switch it to e-drawings, it's taking much longer than I thought it would. There we go. There's a choice to allow people to have an STL with the e-drawing. So if you turn that on, when you send out an e-drawing, not only can they physically see your 3D model on, not physically, but virtually see your 3D model on the screen and spin it around, take measurements and things like that. But if you turn this checkbox on, they can actually print out a 3D file. An STL file is for a 3D print. And the reason that's so easy in an e-drawing is because it's just tessellated data. What tessellation is just triangles. So if you have a cube, that's 12 triangles. If you have a cylinder, it's a bunch of triangles on top and bottom, and then triangles all along the side. And so it starts giving you faceted edges. So it's not a true cylinder when you're doing STLs, but it is what people use for their 3D prints. If you have your STL set fine enough, you can mitigate those facets, but they're always going to be there at some level. The other type of model that people like to have is an STL, which is true spheres, true cylinders. There's no triangles involved. So if I add a new configuration here, and do a save as to an E drawing, or an E assembly in this case. There it is. It's taking a second here. Okay, so what's new with the save as E drawing is I can actually save multiple configurations, and I can save a step file into there. Now you do want to be careful with the step file because it's the secret sauce. It's the real deal. So I can pick and choose which configurations I want to, and with this attachment, I can pick and choose which ones I want to embed a step file to. Not only is it giving away the secret sauce, it's also going to make the E drawing, which is usually a small file, a gigantic file, because it's going to embed that step file in there. Also, the more configurations you do, the more step files you do, the larger this E drawing is going to become. It's going to take a little longer to open than E drawings. It's going to be pretty big. So rather than emailing it, you'll probably have to share it from a drive. I'm just going to cancel out of here because let's show you eDrawings 2021. There are some changes. When I do the file open, obviously I can open up an existing file, but see where it says open in VR? There were third-party add-ins that did this, where it would take your eDrawing stuff and you could put on your VR goggles and you could go jump inside your vehicle. You could climb on top of your structure using this, the virtual reality. So now it's actually in eDrawings. If you have the goggles plugged into your computer and all that software, you say open in VR, you put your goggles, and rather than me looking at the mini MIG and spinning it around on the screen, I can go, jump onto the wing, get into the cockpit. Does this thing make me claustrophobic? You get a lot of information when you're in VR. I worked on a large structure, and we put on a lot more handrails and things once we stood at the top of it in VR, because you would get vertigo actually in virtual reality on this thing. But let's take a look at the recent documents. I saved out, because you know that if I got a jet engine, I got to put it into something. So through the wonder of GrabCAD, I also grabbed somebody's plane and I scaled down the jet, shoved it inside the plane. Here we go. eDrawings does handle decals. The rest of this stuff is all split lines and that sort of stuff. So that's just colors, but you can now take a look at which attachments are there. So you see that I've got the full step file to this thing in this eDrawing. If I send it over to somebody, they can open this eDrawing, download the step file, and then have the solid model. So if they need to work on it or they want to make a copy of it, whatever, that's the real file. I can also switch configurations. Takes a second to rebuild. It's got to regenerate the graphics, but there we go. That's the core of this thing. Basically, you're riding a rocket. But again, it gives you the ability to show different configurations and embed those files. So that's what's new with eDrawings. Any questions so far on any of this new stuff? Hopefully you guys can see some of the value in here. Definitely, I often end up getting assign top-level assembly duty and stuff like that, and it can be pretty rough just sitting there watching that hourglass go as you're waiting for it to open, or you're taking a lot of coffee breaks during the day and doing just 10, 15 minutes actual work. So it's a huge time saver. Hopefully you guys can see the value in it. Let me free up some of these windows here. Because I guess I should talk about stability. It is another thing besides the large assemblies. This is more stable. I have found it to be a bit more stable than 18. 19 was a little more stable than 18 actually. But I've still had hangups and occasional crashes. It's not completely, free from crashing, but it's not that often. It's not as bad as it was in 18, I don't think. But right after I say that, I'm sure I'm going to crash the next example. Okay. This one's a little less exciting, but again, I did want to show you some of the stuff that they've done with these tooltips. Make it really nice for not only new users, but some existing users. If you don't really realize what that alternative is supposed to do, that's what it does. It gives you a dashed view. If you have two configurations in different positions, that's what an alternate view is. So I don't have to read an article about it. I take a look at the picture and I'm like, get it, and then I know what to do. There is a new type of section. I guess it's not a new type of section. People have used it in the past, but it's new for SolidWorks to be able to do it. And it's something called the removed section. So what this does for you is you can pick between two edges here. And then it gives you this other edge, which you can use like smart snaps. But it just slices it like that for you. So again, it's kind of a new thing for me because I've never made a view like this. I've done section views and just said, show me a slice view in the past, but apparently this is a detailing standard that people do in places. So SolidWorks gave me the ability to do it. It doesn't have to be a straight edge. You can use arcs as well. Also, automatic. It's just going to snap to things. If you turn it to manual, I can actually, grab exactly where I want these handles to be, and they will still snap to midpoints and things like that for me, but I get a little bit more of that control. Drop that one in kind of fast. Try it again here.
Hey, Lars, are these 2021 specific or also in 2020?
This one right here is 2021 specific. The large detailing, also 2021. So it was really hard for me to try and do this as here's what's new in 19, here's what's new in 20, here's what's new in 2021. Because a lot of the stuff builds on top of this stuff, like the large design review that I was showing you. In 19, you were able to put a component in and made it, but you weren't really able to edit existing mates or things like that. So they've been adding to it. So I'm showing you everything in 2021 because that's kind of like the high watermark of all these tools. But this one right here, as you asked, is specific to 2021.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Okay, what else do I want to show you? I want to show you a little bit more about assembly design. So they've changed the open dialog a little bit. I believe they already had this type of stuff as far as 18, where you can filter what type of files you're looking for. If you just want to look for assemblies or you want to see the top level assemblies only, you can filter that. But something that they've kind of changed the field to, it's already been there, but it's a little different, is this down here. It used to just be a pull down, just like these, where I can pull down and pick configuration. But a lot of people didn't understand the difference between resolve, lightweight, and large design review, so they wouldn't even bother pulling that thing down. They'd just say, well, do it resolved. And resolved for a large assembly is your worst choice. That's going to load every single part that's in that assembly onto your RAM. Takes a long time to get it from the network, takes a long time to get it in there, and then it has to solve everything. So that's what takes forever when you're doing large design. Lightweight, if I hold my cursor over it, you see that it's just going to load in graphics data and geometry, like your planes and axes that you can mate to right out of the gate. So you can work on it just like it's a SolidWorks assembly. You just can't work on it at the part level. You can't go change features and things like that right off the bat. You have to resolve or load up individual parts yourself to be able to work on them. So if I open this thing up lightweight, it's still going to take a while. It's not as fast as large design review. I am cheating here a little because the jet that I'm using here is actually saved out as parts and then scaled to fit into this assembly. They still haven't given us the ability to scale assemblies, unfortunately. If you want to scale an assembly, you have to save it as a part first. Okay, so I'm still waiting for this thing to load up the files here. But it always seems to take longer. Seems to take longer when I've got a lot of people staring at me. But lightweight is definitely a longer proposition than the large design review. There we go. So here we go. This has got a little bit more to it. So you see that when I select on something, it's got these feathers in front of it. And those are what's known as lightweight parts. So all I'm looking at is basically, again, the tessellated data, the e-drawing, just the skin of my model. Doesn't see it as a solid. I don't get any access to features. I can just see these reference geometry. If I want to mate things to an axis or a plane, I can get that and use my mate tools in this lightweight mode. What is new is before you would need to right click and say resolve or double click on an item to get it to load into your RAM. Let's see if I go into my files here, and what I've got open in SolidWorks is not a ton, because that's the whole thing. It's not loading up every single file. If this had been loaded and resolved, this would be a gigantic list of files that are open in RAM. But right now, I just have a single file open. If I expand an assembly or a part, those get loaded into RAM automatically. I don't have to double click on them anymore. They're just trying to get people to be more comfortable in this, because you figure if you expand a part, that's because you were hoping to get into, editing one of the features of that part. And I can now that this part has been solved, I can work on just this part and not have to load everything that's around it. So if you do want to make changes while you're in the assembly mode, you certainly can do that in this in the lightweight mode. Okay, here's something that I use all the time when I'm doing design. It's called an envelope. I don't know if everybody's familiar with it, but usually what you'll do an envelope for is it'll be a virtual part that's the geometry that you're trying to capture. So if I isolate the envelope that I've got, that's what this part, everything is built around this. And rather than putting this part into all the files, I just put it at the top level assembly, and I can see exactly where it is. And here's what envelopes do for me. They give me the 3D geometry, so I can offset surfaces, I can sketch on faces, I can use the geometry to convert entities and things like that. But what's so special about an envelope? It's not too difficult to make. You just go into the properties and hit envelope. And the difference between a regular file and an envelope file is the envelope file will not be in the bill of materials and it will not be in the mass properties. So it's a ghost. There's no reporting of it. All it is something graphically that I can use for design. But when it comes time to how much does this assembly weigh, I don't have a bunch of duplicates in there because I'm using these envelopes that are ghosts. When I ask for a bill of materials, I don't get a ton of things in my bill that are just there for parts. Someone's asking me, when was this introduced? Okay, this is actually really, really old. It's just something that I've certainly been a champion of it and tried to get other people to use it in my classes, but it's one of those things you just don't know about. If you see over here, it looks like a snail mail envelope with a little part icon next to it. That's the difference between, telling whether it's full weight or envelope. But it's been around for a while. It's just one of those things that's really tough to get to because it's one of those things that you right click and then you go look for a checkbox in this giant list. It's not the easiest thing to find. So if you didn't know about envelopes, don't beat yourself up about it. They hit it really well. Okay, it certainly is thinking a lot about this. I told you if I said this thing was stable, it was going to crash very soon. So maybe this is my karma coming here. Hey, there we go. Hopefully it does not take as long to unenvelope it. But you see that I just changed that component. You can change an assembly or a component or anything you want, and it's just this checkbox envelope. So it's basically ignore in bill of materials plus ignore in mass properties. But it still takes the same amount of time to load up. It is a part file, goes into your RAM. From that standpoint, there's not much difference. What the new thing is, why I'm even bringing up envelopes, is they've brought something into the product that helps you create envelopes very quickly. If you've got something inside of an assembly that you need to reference at different levels of the assembly, you don't have to always do your work at the top level. You can stick these envelopes in from the top level into the components that are below. So, what am I talking about? Envelope Publisher. It's a really simple tool. What components, and so you see that these are both plural. I can put as many of the parts as I want into envelopes. And so I pick, okay, I want to have this canopy. And I want to see what it looks like on the fuselage, and I want to see what it looks like in the cockpit. And so instead of me having duplicate components going in and putting the component and then trying to figure out where it mates in the assembly or anything like that, it's just dropping it into the XYZ position that it is in the top level, fixing in that position and putting it in the sub-assemblies as an envelope. So now if I were to open up one of those sub-assemblies, I've got this folder called Published Envelopes, and it'll have a list of all the things that I push down into those assemblies. And so now I can get a feel for how this thing fits on there. I can start taking, like I said, convert entities or things that I need to do to use that geometry to create stuff inside the cockpit. I can reference that now and not have to be in the top level. I also don't have to worry about, did I accidentally make this thing in the bill of materials, or am I weighing it when I do my mass properties? So it's just an easier way to use an existing tool. It is one of those tools not a lot of people are familiar with, but it's a really nice assembly creation tool. When you're in the design process, I use these a lot just because I have a reference that everything's using and I don't have to worry about whether I've got duplicate parts. And this one's simple. It's just a little under 100 parts. So not too long to open it up. There we go. So what I wanted to talk to you about was the exploded view. So if I go to explode, obviously we've had the ability to do these explosions. It is a little better at the drag here. But you'll see that when it comes to doing multiple components, there are different ways. So when you do the multiple components, you have this choice to do the auto space, which basically telescopes everything out. You can pick 10 parts and it'll drag them out like it telescopically. When you do that on these components, you'll see that now we have a setting as far as when you do the telescoping, it's going to drop in these little drag handles on it. Where do you want the drag handles to start up on your part? Basically, because these were kind of hard to control with earlier versions here. What just happened? My screen went black. Oh, hey. Okay, if I have one regret today, it's me saying that this thing doesn't crash. I certainly jinxed myself. I was not crashing while I was going through all this, but here we are. Okay. Let's try that again. Okay. Okay, so single component. You see that while I'm in here, I can add items. It'll start chaining them together. It builds these little groups for me. Got this done box right here. And as I was saying before, if I am in a multiple, there we go. There's that telescoping. Where it chooses to put the arrows, again, is you get a little bit more control over that. Also, just moving them, the way it groups them, it all seems a lot more robust and solid for me. So if it gets wrong, the way that you're supposed to put these things in, you can move them around. That sort of thing. And when you're in here, in the exploded view, you can change, you know, the order of things. Just click, drag, and drop. Usually it doesn't matter what order they go in. The only reason it usually would is if you're planning on doing an animation of that. So we've had the ability to do animations. If you animate a collapsed view, it's got this little video. You can make it fast, you can make it slow, you can make it go back and forth. You can also save it. And here's something that is new, is the fact that we can now save out of SolidWorks MP4s. It used to just be AVIs, which are a very old file type. A lot of times people would have to have certain things loaded on their machine in order to play an AVI correctly. So MP4 is just a lot easier. You don't need anything on your computer. All computers can play MP4s these days. So it's a nice option. I can send this out as a MP4 to somebody, and then, here's how it goes together. I can send them a little video of that explode collapse. So yeah, you can see, like I said, that earlier in some assemblies, when I'd be spinning this around, I would be dropping frames a lot. It's actually dropping frames. When I'm looking on my screen, it's not dropping frames, but it is dropping frames up on the GVC. So I guess you got to load it to believe it, but it is a lot smoother than it used to be, and it doesn't have that blocky, choppy feeling that it used to. Okay. Flexible parts is something that's new in 2020, I believe. Might be 2021. But we've had the ability to create flexible parts already. When you've got an assembly, as you move it around, you can have this part. If it's modeled in the assembly, it's just referencing the assembly for its position. So you've already had the ability to make these types of flexible parts. But the difference is that you can reuse them now. So I've got this boot that I use on all my joysticks. And as luck would have it, I would like to use it on this one. So this one's got this little sheet metal body. It's a little different. This is the one that goes in the mini MIG for guided control. If I insert that component, it's just going to be inserted, solved the way it was in the assembly that it was created in. So if somebody goes into that assembly and starts moving this thing around, this part's going to change. It's not referencing this assembly. So what I can do is, they've got this new option right here in my pop-up, make part flexible. So this is only going to work on a part that's got these external references. There's some other rules to it. You're only allowed to have a reference to one part, that sort of thing. So it's not all the way, but it's a really big deal. Let me show you what it does. So I said, make this part flexible, and it says, okay, in the other assembly, sketch 3 is referencing a face and an edge. And it shows me a little preview of what the face and edge looked like. I just have to tell it what that face and edge is in this assembly. So I can say, okay, it was the bottom of the assembly. You see that's turned to a green check mark, and the circle of this post. Now, this thing will resolve in this assembly. And it'll have no effect on this assembly. So you can have parts like boots or cables, wires, belts, those sorts of things that now you can build top down so that they'll change when pulleys move or the spring gets compressed. You still can do that, but the nice thing is you can take that spring and you can use it in other assemblies and just say, no, instead of it being mounted here, now in this assembly it's mounted here, and it'll start solving with the geometry from that assembly rather than the original assembly. And you can see it puts this little parentheses around the external reference. Yay. Okay, here's what I wanted to show you. See how fast this thing spins around? Again, the GVC is not doing it justice. On my screen, there's no chop. It's actually the thing. Hopefully the recording. I don't know. I don't think the recording is going to be any better. But it doesn't make it blocky. Doesn't make it choppy. So let's get back to this. Let's get into what's new at the part level before these assemblies drive me crazy. And I'm going to do a sheet metal tool. There's a new, it's not brand new. They had it in 2018. This tab and slot command. They've just improved it. So what I can do is I can say, okay, I'm going to start my slot from here, and then it's going to terminate there. I can give information as far as the spacing between them or the length of them. How many of them there are, that sort of thing. What is new on this? Before, what it was doing is it is always going to this. So your tab would always go through the slot until it reached the top of the surface, and then it would terminate. But now you can actually do a blind distance. If for whatever reason you want that tab to go beyond the slot, you can do that. Or you can do an offset if you just want to go just before the slot, those types of things. You can have it miss by so much. You see, if I just want a little bit of a nub or something like that, I can set how far from the terminating face this thing's going to be. And you also have the option whether you want to chamfer it, put fillets on it, or just have it be a square tab. So a nice tool for sheet metal that they've been improving over the years. Another thing that they've done is they've continued to improve the spline capabilities when you're making surfaces and things like that. I get on my evaluate, I can put on these zebra stripes, and this will show me whether or not edges have curvature or tangency or things like that. And you can see that when you see something like this happening, it's not a completely smooth curve. There's going to be a little bit of an edge there. So it's something called C3 curvature. I am going to be offering a surfacing class here a little later if you're interested in finding out exactly what C1, 2, and 3 curvature is, but basically it's making it so it isn't like this. I don't have an actual edge. If I run my finger over it, I'm not going to feel any difference between the surface at that point. And right now I would. The thing that's new here is if I go in to edit the sketch, I've been able to do these for a while. Tangency, equal curvature, but now they've got this torsion continuity, which is going to give me true C3. And now you can see as my zebra stripes go over that, there's no pronounced change in angle of them. It is one smooth face. Even though I've got two faces here, if I run my finger over it, I'm not going to feel that edge because they're actually the same exact curve. So for people that do surfacing and things like that, it's really nice to be able to do that at the sketch level because the sketches are what make your surface. And if you've got a perfectly smooth curve building that surface, you're going to get perfectly smooth faces and things like that. So it is nice for people that are doing, more industrial design. There's also another tool inside the sketcher that is really nice. You heard me talk earlier about top-down design and envelopes and doing convert entities, where you're basically grabbing edges from geometry and putting it into a sketch, which is not new. We've been able to do that for a long time. So let me just open a sketch on this plane over here. Go to my convert entities. We've been able to do these intersection curves where if you have, I want to see where anything crosses the sketch plane that I'm using. It'll draw a line or a curve or wherever that geometry is crossing it. You can also do a convert entities, but with convert entities, you have to pick a face or edges. And sometimes when you pick faces, it wouldn't give you all the edges or it wouldn't do it correctly. They've got this new one here called a silhouette entity, which is pretty cool. When I pick it, if I just say OK right now, it'll just do the outside edge of it because it's got this external silhouette. And you can think of it as a silhouette, like you're shining a light through the part. If I shine a light through this part, what do I get on the other side? And so I don't have to sit there and pick edge after edge or faces or control select or any of that stuff. I just say, this model, what's it look like if you shine a light through it onto this plane? Which isn't much for a, I was perpendicular to it, but you can also do it at any angle. So if I were to open a sketch on this angled plane and do the same thing, rather than being true circles, which was what I got when I shone a light through the holes looking straight down at them, now that it's at an angle, I get these splines that are elliptical. But if I go normal to my sketch plane, that's exactly what that part looks like if I'm looking at it from that plane. So it's just an easier way to grab geometry off of something. It's, again, in your usual convert entities, just in that pull down. All right, so I showed you a little bit of sheet metal. That tab tool is pretty cool. Another thing is structural design. They have a weldments package that has different cross sections in it, but if you've ever used weldments, it takes a lot of sketching, it takes a lot of trimming, it takes a lot of work to get your weldment all done. And so many people build structural systems that SolidWorks decided to give you something better, or at least easier. I got this structure system tab, and you're wondering where all the tools are. There aren't a whole lot of tools to this. And what it does, I turn it on, you can see that I'm in this structure system mode. I only get to pick two different cross sections. I get a primary cross section and a secondary cross section. The primary cross section, I can use, as you would expect, typical sketch geometry. I pick what sketch geometry I want. It's only going to pick solid geometry. See, it ignored the construction geometry. And I can use any profiles. I do have to warn you, if you're going straight from 18 and you have 21 and 18 loaded on your system, you may have trouble here because the 18, when you load 21 on a machine that's got 18, it's still going to use all the file locations from 18 just to make your life easier. So you're using your templates, you're using your weldment cross sections, you're using all the stuff that you were using back in 18. The trouble comes is that in versions past 18, they started giving us the ability to put configurations into these cross-sectional shapes. And this tool needs those configurations to work. So what I had to do on this system is I had to go into my file properties and change where my weldment profiles were coming from and make sure that the weldment profiles were coming from 19 or newer. So I just got them from 21. And here's the ones that came with 21. It actually loads a lot more of them than it used to, too. But if I want to pick, aluminum square tubing, I've got all these sizes available to me. And it populates them all. When I get out of here, At first I was a little confused because I'm not seeing any bodies or, I see this geometry, but it's not all that great. It's not trimmed up to each other or anything. The thing is it's not going to do all the trimming until I say, okay, get out of the structural tool. And then it'll fix it all up for me. Before I do, I want to show you secondary members. What secondary members allow you to do is you can put in items where you don't need to sketch. Primary members, it's a good idea to do them as sketch geometry, but for these secondary members, I can pick where I want to put this member. I do have to here we go. And I can pick where in between those two this is going to happen. I can align it to other members if it needs to be parallel to something else or perpendicular to something else. I can use those tools, but I can also, put in numbers as far as where I want this thing to start and end. Right now, it's defaulting to the same cross-section, but you can actually use for your secondary cross-section, you can use a different cross-section. So if I was going to use something like an angle iron, you see where I put it right in the middle. I do have the ability to either just drag and drop this thing to the position that I want. I can also play along with what angle this comes in at, things like that. So if I want it, do I want it in between them or do I want it to be to the side? Depends whether I'm going to weld it together or use hardware, things like that. But you can do either one. They don't have to trim up to each other. They can be separate if you need them. If you do multiple choices, you see the controls are set the same, where it's moving the position for both of them. If you don't want to do that, you have to put them in as separate pieces. Okay. So again. So if I need to put cross supports in there, things like that, I can do that pretty easily. Yeah. And again, it's still not cutting these things up. It's just putting them in at their full length. When it will do that is when I exit out of the command, it asks me a question. It says, okay, how do these things trim up to each other? So if you've got like a pipe or something like that, this choice will choose to conform to whatever shape is in front of it. So if you're hitting an L bracket, it's not just going to stop at the first time it touches the L bracket. It's actually going to scoop out that shape so it fits perfectly in there. You can actually put an offset value there. So if you need a little room for your weld, you certainly can do that in between your trims. This choice right here, rather than, again, conforming to any contours or anything, like if it was an I-beam, it would conform to that web. You can also just choose to do it as a planar cut. And it'll go through and it will trim up everything for you. Now you can see it's no longer the full value. It's actually trimmed right up to wherever I want it to be. And it's a little different. You've got two features here. If you go in here, you can edit the feature. You can start putting in more items, things like that. These are just solid bodies that I'm using here. So I can use tools that I'm used to using. It's not like you have to, if you start using the structural tool, you can't use the tools that you're used to. It definitely is just another SolidWorks file. Instead of mirroring the feature, I can choose what bodies I want to mirror. There we go, and I can start building bleachers for watching our little plane fly around. You can jump back into the tool. It's not like once you're done, you can't use it again. You just go into the structural system. And if I need to start adding secondary members to this thing for more support, I can definitely do that. Again, if you want to have different controls for the heights on your secondary, when you're doing it in this way, you want to do them as separate items. Something like that. And again, when you get out, it asks you the same questions. How do you want this to solve? Planar or up to a surface? And again, it does all the trimming for you. So all that busy work that you had to do with your weldments, this thing's kind of taking care of it. You can build really simple structures quickly. Obviously, if you're going to have a bunch of different cross sections, pipes, and C-channels and all that sort of stuff, you still want to use weldments. It still is a valid tool. But if it's something simple like this, where I'm just using a couple of cross-sectional values, and it's very repetitive, which structures tend to be, like these bleachers, you can take care of that very easily with this structural tool. Okay. One last thing I want to cover here, and it's kind of the big going out one. When I first saw this demonstrated at one of the SolidWorks Worlds, I believe it was in SolidWorks 19, I was very excited by it. And then I got less excited when I saw what it really did. But they've been making improvements to it over the past few years. And it's a way of modeling that you're just not going to be able to do very easily with your typical modeling tools. Hey, let's one out. All right. I need to get into this part. Okay. So here I've got a multi-body part. This is the interior of that thing. This is where the guy sits. I want this to be an upholstered seat. Okay. Modeling upholstery is very difficult. Trying to do it, you'll just lose your mind trying. So SolidWorks gives us an ability with this new tool. It's called a 3D texture. Inside of my groups, I've got this group of 3D textures. One of the things they did was they put this in here. In 19, they just said, hey, you can do this with a gray and black JPEG. That's you need a black and white JPEG, but they didn't give us any of them. Now, not only did they give them to us, they show what they look like, in 3D. So I want my seat to have a shape like that on it. So I just drag and drop it and apply it to that face. When I go into my appearances, if I double click on this, I can get into editing it. And you'll see it gives me these little controls here. What these controls allow me to do is I can resize this. if I click and drag on the corner of it, or if I'm in the middle of this rectangle, I can click and drag it to whatever position I want it to be. I do want to be careful. It does get a little tricky as to when you start splitting these edges along the side and things like that, but let's take a look at what this does. First, you need to put a black and white texture onto your face. And then there's this thing called a 3D texture. It says, well, okay, it does it by body. And here's the warning, is your solid body is not going to be a solid body when you do this. And that's why I was kind of nonplussed when I first saw this, because in 19, that's where they left it. It turns it into a graphic body. But I'm going to say, I want to use that shape and convert this Dimple 24 into a 3D texture. You have the choice of whether the white or the black goes up or down with this toggle. And what I want to do here is I want to tell it the height that I'm going to go. And see how it's putting a mesh on here? If I set the value of that mesh smaller, I get more precise details. So you see what it's doing here. It's doing something I'm not going to be able to model. And so there it is. Hey, it looks like an upholstered seat. That's so much cooler than me trying to figure out how to do that with lofts. But like I said, the part where I was not so happy in 19, I ended up with this imported graphics body, which is cool for looking at and cool for rendering and things like that. But when it comes to manufacturing, it does me no good. It is not a solid. I can't make this into an STL. So in later versions, they gave us the ability to convert to a mesh body. When you do that, it turns it into a solid body. Which means that I can bring this thing up and I can save it out as an STL or whatever. It is a solid body now. So it's become from something where I can make this thing look really cool, to I can make it look really cool, and I can send it out to people to get 3D printed or manufactured or whatever I want to do, because it's seen as a solid now. And so that's pretty cool. Okay, unsuppress this, because look what I got here. Actually, I got this from SolidWorks. It loads up with these two dragons in here. And I was like, could I actually do those dragons? The answer is yes. So you see, it's got to be a grayscale drawing. It gives more value to white and black for going up and down, and then gray is the intermediate area. So if you have a drawing like this, you can get some pretty crazy geometry using that 3D texture. Well, I say, yes, I do want to make this thing into it, but this is going to be much smaller as far as how high it is. And again, this is really the one where you start to get there we go. It's putting that dragon on there. So it opens up a whole possibility again, as far as industrial design or making something look cool, putting a logo on something. You can do it really fast now. I would not even know where to begin to make this dragon if I was supposed to model it. I know that it would take me a week or two, probably, to get it done. And here, I just have a picture, I drop it, I say, make it this high, and now I've got something that you always have to remember to do this. I wish it just did it on its own, but you do have to take that extra step and say, okay, cool graphics body, looks great. Now I'll turn it into a solid. So if I save this thing out as a parasolid, a step file, an STL, whatever, people on the receiving end can see my artwork. Okay, that is what's new. Sorry about the crash in the middle. Again, I blame myself. I have found 21 to be a bit more stable. As you can see, it's still got some crash issues, but working with large design, building these kinds of things out of images, it's going to make my life a whole lot easier. You guys have any questions before I turn this off? Okay, well, thanks for coming. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you guys at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lars.
Thanks, Lars.
Thank you very much.